I sat alone for my 40th birthday dinner, table for 6. My wife, my own brother, my best friend, all vanished. They thought I was a fool. Then the waiter handed me a note. Check your phone. Now, the low hum of the Argent was a familiar comfort, a symphony of clinking glasses, murmured conversations, and the distant sizzle of prime steak meeting a hot grill. It was the kind of place where deals were closed and anniversaries were celebrated, all wrapped in the scent of dark wood, old leather, and money. Tonight, it was supposed to be my sanctuary, the stage for my 40th birthday. Instead, it was my Colosseum, and I was the lone gladiator staring down 5 empty chairs. I glanced at my iPad, the screen glowing with the blueprints for the new public library. Lines, angles, load-bearing walls, a world of order and logic. I'd been sketching for the last hour, a desperate attempt to impose a familiar structure onto the creeping chaos of the evening. It was a lifelong habit, a defense mechanism. When the world felt messy, I retreated into the clean, predictable world of architecture. Tonight, the world was a goddamn mess. My fingers traced the outline of a cantilevered reading nook, but my mind was on the empty seats. One for Isabella, my wife of 15 years. One for Julian, my older brother. One for David, my best friend since college. 2 more for his wife and another close friend. A table for 6. My table for 6. My internal monologue was running on a loop of well-practiced excuses. Isabella's probably stuck in a client meeting. You know how she gets when she's closing a deal. Julian, well, Julian's just being Julian. He probably decided to make a grand entrance. It was a voice I knew well, the voice of appeasement, the one my mother had cultivated in me since childhood. Just keep the peace, Alex, she'd always say whenever Julian threw a tantrum or broke one of my toys. It's easier than fighting. For 40 years, I'd mistaken that for wisdom. For 40 years, I'd chosen a fragile harmony over the hard, ugly truth. A ghost of a smile touched my lips as I remembered telling Isabella how excited I was. The Argent, Izzy, just like we planned. Our tradition for the big ones. She'd kiss my cheek, her scent of expensive perfume a familiar cloud around me. Of course, darling. I'll even order the chocolate lava cake you love. Don't you worry about a thing. The hostess had already passed my table twice, her professional smile tightening with each pass. The pity was the worst part. It was a tangible thing, a film in the air. I was becoming a spectacle, the man celebrating his own milestone birthday, alone. Marco, the waiter, approached. He was a fixture at the Argent, a man with a quiet dignity who had served my family for years. He remembered that I liked my steak medium rare, that Isabella preferred Sauvignon Blanc, and that Julian always complained the ice cubes were too small. His eyes weren't filled with pity, but with something else, a quiet, knowing empathy. Mr. Hayes, he said, his voice a low baritone that cut through the restaurant's hum. He placed a heavy crystal tumbler on the coaster before me. The liquid inside was a deep amber, a Macallan 18. To mark the occasion, this is on the house. I looked from the glass to his face. It wasn't the standard complimentary drink for a valued customer. The choice was too specific, too personal. He knew I reserved the 18-year-old single malt for significant moments. It was a small gesture, but in the echoing silence of my empty celebration, it felt monumental. It was the first sign that someone in the room truly saw me. Thank you, Marco. I managed, my voice hoarser than I expected. I appreciate that. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, his gaze holding mine for a fraction of a second too long. Of course, Mr. Hayes. Some occasions deserve to be marked properly. He walked away, leaving me with the expensive scotch and the gnawing feeling that he knew more about my evening than I did. I took a sip. The whiskey was smooth, with notes of oak and dried fruit, but it burned a cold trail down to the pit of my stomach, where a knot of dread was beginning to tighten. The blueprints on my iPad screen suddenly seemed like a foreign language, the lines and angles mocking me with their perfect, unattainable order. The real world was here, in the 5 empty chairs and the silent, unanswered question hanging in the air. The Macallan was half gone, its warmth doing little to thaw the chill that had settled deep in my bones. 93 minutes. I'd been here for 93 minutes. The initial anxiety had curdled into a sour certainty. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Isabella's contact photo, a smiling shot of us in Tuscany from 2 summers ago. She looked so happy. We looked so happy. I pressed the call button. Straight to voicemail. Not even a ring. Her phone was off. I tried Julian. It rang once, a single, hopeful pulse in the silence, and then an abrupt click. He hadn't missed the call. He'd actively rejected it. That single click was the loose thread. I pulled on it, and 15 years of my life began to unravel in my mind. The rejection triggered a cascade of memories, small red flags I'd painted white in the name of peace, moments of cognitive dissonance I'd explain away with the logic of a man who desperately wanted to believe in the structure he had built. First, the watch. My grandfather's 1962 Omega Seamaster. It wasn't just a timepiece. It was a talisman. He'd fasten it to my wrist on the day I got my acceptance letter to architecture school. His hand, frail but firm, had rested on mine. An architect must respect time and legacy. Alex, his gravelly voice had echoed in the memory. This is the foundation of everything worthwhile. It had vanished from my dresser a month ago. I'd been devastated. Isabella had been a whirlwind of performative concern, helping me search every drawer, every pocket. "Oh, honey, it has to be here somewhere. We'll find it, I promise." Her voice had been so convincing. Then the gaslighting. Subtle, insidious. A few months back, I'd mentioned to Isabella that I felt Julian was being particularly dismissive, making little jokes at my expense in front of our friends. She'd put her hand on my cheek, her expression a perfect mask of loving concern. "Oh, honey, you're just stressed from the library project. You're imagining things. You know how much your brother looks up to you. Don't be so sensitive." She made me feel foolish, paranoid for even bringing it up. So I'd buried the feeling, chalking it up to my own insecurity. The money. Her sudden, intense interest in our finances. She, who had never once balanced a checkbook, was suddenly talking about diversifying assets and private investment strategies. She'd set up a new account, she said, for her own little ventures. "It's important for me to have my own thing, you know, for my independence." I had supported it, proud of her initiative. The loving, supportive husband. The fool. Each memory was a brick being pulled from the foundation of my marriage, and the whole edifice was starting to groan under the strain. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb shaking slightly. I needed an anchor, a fixed point in my tilting world. My parents. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Alex, honey, I was just thinking about you. Happy birthday, my darling boy." A lump formed in my throat. "Thanks, Mom. Hey, just a quick question. Have you heard from Isabella or Julian today?" There was a pause. The silence was filled with genuine confusion. "Alex? Darling, what are you talking about? I'm a bit confused." "I'm at the Argent," I said, my own voice sounding distant. "For the birthday dinner. They're not here. It's been over an hour and a half." "The Argent." Her confusion deepened. "But Isabella called us yesterday afternoon. She said you were having a rough time, feeling overwhelmed with work and everything. She said you decided to cancel the big dinner, that you just wanted some quiet space alone. She made us promise not to call and bother you. We were worried, sweetheart. Robert wanted to drive down, but she insisted you needed to be left alone." The phone felt slick in my hand. The background noise of the restaurant faded to a dull roar, like listening to the ocean in a seashell. It wasn't just a missed dinner. It wasn't a miscommunication. It was a lie. A detailed, premeditated, and manipulative lie, told to the very people I trusted most, designed with architectural precision to isolate me on my 40th birthday. They hadn't just stood me up. They had built a cage of concern around me and locked the door, ensuring no one would come looking. And I, the master architect, had sat inside it, patiently waiting, admiring the craftsmanship. I ended the call with my mother, my mind a maelstrom of shock and a strange, terrifying clarity. I was a feature in a landscape painting I didn't know I was sitting for. The man whose wife and brother were so worried about his fragile state. The man who needed his space. I stared into the amber depths of the Macallan, and for the first time, I saw the situation without the softening filter of hope. This was an act of breathtaking cruelty. As if summoned by the shift in my demeanor, Marco appeared at my side. He moved with a quiet efficiency that was his trademark, but this time, it felt different. It felt intentional. He didn't say a word. He simply placed a small, folded cocktail napkin on the table beside my bourbon. On it, written in a neat, concise hand, were 2 words, check phone. My gaze lifted from a napkin to his face. His expression was impassive, but his eyes held a steady, unwavering look of solidarity. And in that moment, the narrative of the past week snapped into sharp focus. This wasn't a random act of kindness from a perceptive waiter. This was the culmination of a plan. The scene replayed in my mind, not as a memory, but as a crucial piece of evidence. A week ago, after Isabella had given another flimsy excuse for a girls' night out that didn't add up, the gnawing suspicion had become unbearable. I couldn't keep living in the fog. That afternoon, I had walked into the Argent. It was empty, the quiet hum of the downtime between lunch and dinner service filling the space. Marco was meticulously setting tables, aligning forks and knives with an architect's precision. I had approached him, my heart hammering against my ribs, feeling like a fool, a paranoid husband from a bad TV movie. "Marco," I'd started, my voice barely a whisper. "Forgive me for this is going to sound crazy, but you're a good judge of character. You see things." I'd taken a breath. "Have you noticed anything unusual? With my wife, Isabella? Maybe with my brother, Julian?" He had stopped what he was doing, a wine glass held perfectly still in his hand. He didn't reply immediately. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and in that long, assessing gaze, his professional mask had slipped. I saw a flicker of something human, something somber. "Mr. Hayes," he'd finally said, his voice low and serious. He'd placed the glass down on the table. "5 years ago, my sister's husband did something similar to her. With her own best friend. He convinced everyone she was going crazy. I watched her break. I watched her doubt her own mind until she had nothing left." He paused, his eyes hardening slightly. "I see the same look in your eyes now. So, to answer your question, yes, Mr. Hayes, I have seen them. And you are not imagining a single damn thing." Relief and horror had washed over me in equal measure. I wasn't crazy, but the truth was so much worse. "What do I do?" I had whispered, the question raw with desperation. Marco's response was calm, strategic. "They have a reservation for your birthday. Table for 6. They are counting on you being weak. Let them. Come to your dinner. Let them stand you up. Let them think their plan is working. And I will gather the truth for you. Not rumors, Mr. Hayes. Proof. The kind that stands up in court." We had forged an alliance in that quiet, empty restaurant. 2 men who understood the particular ugliness of a betrayal that masquerades as concern. Now, back in the present, the napkin on the table felt as heavy as a stone tablet. I looked across the dining room. Marco was at the bar, polishing a glass, his back to me. But I knew he was aware. I gave the slightest of nods, a silent acknowledgement. He was my ally. I pulled out my phone, my hand steady now. A new text message from a number I didn't recognize. A burner phone. Inside the message was a single, innocuous-looking link to a secure cloud folder. I took a deep breath, downed the rest of the Macallan in one fiery gulp, and clicked the link. The architect was about to review the demolition plans for his own life. The cloud folder opened with a quiet efficiency that belied the devastation within. It was organized into 3 subfolders: images, financials, and audio. Marco hadn't just been an observer. He'd been a goddamn archivist of my humiliation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic trapped bird. I clicked on images first. The photos were crystal clear, obviously taken from multiple angles of the restaurant's high-definition security system. There they were, Isabella and Julian, tucked into booth 12, the secluded corner where I had proposed to her 15 years ago. The irony was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. In one shot, Julian was laughing, his head thrown back in arrogant mirth. Isabella was looking at him with an expression of pure adoration I hadn't seen directed at me in years. But it was the detail on his wrist that made my vision swim. Gleaming under the warm lights of the booth was my grandfather's Omega Seamaster. He wore it so casually, so brazenly, a trophy of his conquest. Another photo showed them kissing, not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate kiss, her hand tangled in his hair. The images were time-stamped, 2 nights ago. The same night Isabella had told me she was at a charity fundraiser, the one she claimed was so boring when she got home. I clicked on the financials folder. My stomach clenched. There were photos of receipts, itemized bills from their trysts. Dinners at restaurants I'd only read about. Weekend stays at boutique hotels in the Hudson Valley. Charged on dates I was away on business trips. And then, the final receipt, a charge from a high-end jewelry store in the meatpacking district, dated the day after my watch had vanished. A resizing and cleaning fee. They hadn't just stolen it. They had tailored it for the thief. Every charge was linked to a credit card I'd never seen. A secret account Isabella had been funding by skimming from our joint investment portfolio. The independence she'd wanted. The private ventures I'd so blindly supported. It was all there, a neat and tidy ledger of my own destruction. My hand was shaking as I navigated to the final folder. Audio. There was only one file inside, labeled Booth 12. Tuesday night. I put the phone to my ear, the world shrinking to the sound of their voices. Julian's voice was slick with self-satisfaction. He's so wrapped up in his blueprints, he doesn't see the one being drawn right under his nose. He actually thanked me for helping him look for this watch. Can you believe the nerve? Isabella's laughter followed, a sound that had once been my favorite music. Now, it was brittle, sharp like breaking glass. He's an architect, darling. He builds things. He doesn't know how to tear them down. He's predictable. Then came the words that would be seared into my memory forever, the casual cruelty that defined the entire conspiracy. Let him have his little birthday dinner, she'd said, her voice dripping with a contempt so profound it was almost impressive. The poor, predictable man. He'll sit there all alone at his table for 6, and he'll finally get the message. He'll finally understand what he really means to everyone. I snapped the phone away from my ear, a wave of nausea washing over me. They hadn't just wanted to have an affair. They had wanted to annihilate me. They wanted me to sit in this exact chair, in this exact restaurant, surrounded by the ghosts of the people I loved, and feel the full, crushing weight of my own worthlessness. It was a masterpiece of psychological torture, designed with a sociopath's precision. The man who had walked into the Argent 90 minutes ago, the hopeful, anxious husband, was gone. He had been completely and utterly demolished. I sat there for a long moment, the architect reviewing the smoldering ruins of his life. The pain was a physical presence, a white-hot fire in my chest. But through the fire, something else was being forged. Not sadness, not despair. It was something colder, harder, and infinitely more durable. It was resolve. They thought I didn't know how to tear things down. They were about to find out that a good architect knows a demolition plan is just as important as a blueprint. And I was about to draft the best one of my life. I walked out of the Argent with a composure that felt alien. The night air of New York, usually a chaotic assault on the senses, felt clean and sharp. The rage and the grief were still there, a roaring furnace in my chest, but I had banked the fire. Rage was a blunt instrument. What I needed now was a scalpel. I got into my car and sat for a moment in the silence of the underground garage. The city's muffled heartbeat was a distant drum. My hands were on the steering wheel, and I squeezed, pouring every ounce of my betrayed trust, my shattered love, my searing humiliation into my grip until my knuckles were bone white. A single, guttural sound escaped my lips, half-groan, half-sob, swallowed by the soundproofed interior. It was the only moment of weakness I would allow myself. 1 second of pure, unadulterated pain. Then it was over. The architect took over. The problem solver. The man who builds and who, by necessity, must understand deconstruction. My first call wasn't to my parents. It wasn't to a friend. It was to my designated general. I dialed Frank Peterson. He was a retired corporate lawyer, my father's best friend, a man whose mind was as sharp as a shard of glass. He answered on the second ring, his voice a familiar, gravelly comfort. "Alex, it's late. Everything all right?" "Frank," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. It was level, clinical. "I need a general. I'm going to war." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Frank didn't ask what I meant. He didn't need to. He just understood. "Tell me." I laid it out for him in less than 2 minutes. The affair, the stolen watch, the lies to my parents, the planned humiliation at the restaurant. I mentioned the evidence Marco had collected. I didn't editorialize. I just gave him the facts, the raw data of the betrayal. When I was done, the silence on the other end was heavy. Then Frank spoke, and his voice had lost all its grandfatherly warmth. It was cold, hard steel. "Good God, son. They didn't just stab you in the back. They twisted the knife and sent you the bill for it." He paused. "Okay, no more Mr. Nice Architect. This is what you're going to do. I've already messaged Ms. Albright. She's the best divorce attorney in the city. She's a shark, and right now, you need a shark. Her office will call you at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Don't speak to Isabella or Julian. Don't answer their calls. Don't reply to their texts. Not a word. Understand?" "Understood," I said. "Good. Now, what about your parents?" I was about to call them. "Are they expecting this?" "No," I admitted. "This will destroy them." "All right," Frank said, his voice softening slightly. "Then you give them the facts, Alex. Just the facts. Let their anger focus on the right people. Now get some rest. Tomorrow, the work begins." I hung up and composed an email. The recipient list was my father, my mother, and Frank. The subject line was simple: the truth. I attached the entire cloud folder, the images, the financials, the horrifying audio file. I wrote only one sentence in the body of the email: "I am safe. I will call you in the morning. Please listen to everything before you do anything." I sent it. Then I sent one final text to my parents. "I'm okay. I love you both. We will handle this tomorrow." It was a lie, of course. I knew my father. He wouldn't wait. But it was what a good son was supposed to say. I started the car. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't driving home to Isabella. I was driving home to my house. A structure I had designed, a life I had built. A property that was about to become a fortress. The house was dark when I arrived, an imposing silhouette against the moonless sky. I walked through the rooms I had designed, touching the cool marble of the kitchen island, the smooth steel of the banister. Every surface felt tainted, a monument to a shared life that had been a lie. I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the dark living room, waiting. I was an architect surveying a site before demolition. An hour later, a car pulled into the driveway. Headlights swept across the living room wall. I didn't move. I heard her key in the lock, the familiar click and whir. Isabella stepped inside, flicking on the foyer light. "Alex," she called out, her voice a perfect symphony of manufactured concern. "Oh my God, there you are. I was so worried. My phone died, and then Julian's car wouldn't start. It's been a total nightmare. I am so sorry about dinner, honey." She walked into the living room, a torrent of well-rehearsed lies spilling from her lips. She stopped short when she saw me, sitting there in the dark. "Alex, why are you sitting in the dark? Are you okay? You look strange." I said nothing. Silence was the most powerful tool in my new arsenal. I simply picked up my iPad from the coffee table, unlocked it, and turned the screen towards her. The image glowing in the darkness was the one of her and Julian, locked in a passionate kiss in booth 12, my grandfather's watch a silver scar on his wrist. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The torrent of lies dried up instantly, leaving a desert of stunned silence. The mask of the concerned wife disintegrated, revealing the cheap, panicked artifice beneath. "What? Where did you get that?" she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy thing. Before I could answer, the front door opened again. It was Julian, his own performance already underway. "Hey man, so sorry we're late. Traffic was an absolute beast, and then my battery just died on me." Can you believe? He trailed off as he took in the scene. Me, silent and implacable. Isabella, pale and trembling. His eyes darted to the iPad screen. He froze. The air in the room was thick with their guilt, a toxic, suffocating fog. They stood there, Two deer caught in the headlights of a truth they could no longer outrun. Then, the front door, which they hadn't closed, swung open for a third time, and the real power entered the room. My father, Robert Hayes, stood in the doorway, my mother, Eleanor, just behind him, her hand clutching his arm. They must have broken every speed limit between their home and mine. Their faces were not masks of anger. They were landscapes of devastation. My father's jaw was set like granite. My mother's eyes, usually so warm, were filled with a chilling, crystalline sorrow. They didn't look at me at first. They looked at the two people who had betrayed their family. Robert walked past Isabella and Julian as if they were statues, pieces of furniture. He came and stood before me. He placed a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. His voice was quiet, but it filled the cavernous room. "Are you okay, son?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my throat tight with an emotion I couldn't name. It was the first time all night I felt like I might break. My father squeezed my shoulder, then he turned. The full force of his presence, the quiet authority he had commanded his entire life, was now directed at his eldest son. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "The watch," he said, his voice dangerously low. "My father's watch. Take it off and put on that table. Now." Julian, trembling, fumbled with the clasp. He looked like a child caught stealing. He avoided our father's gaze, his eyes fixed on the floor as he placed the gleaming Omega on the coffee table next to the iPad. It lay there between us, the symbol of our shattered family. My father looked at the watch, then at Julian. His eyes were cold. "I have only one son now," he said, each word a perfectly placed stone, building a wall between them forever. He then turned his gaze to Isabella, who flinched as if struck. "Get out of my son's house." Eleanor spoke for the first time, her voice flat and hollow, devoid of its usual warmth. 30 years, Isabella," she whispered, looking at the woman she had treated like a daughter. "I held you at your wedding. I was there when you miscarried. I loved you. How could you?" There was no answer. There was nothing to say. The verdict had been delivered. My father, the patriarch. My mother, the heart of our family. They had passed sentence. I just sat there, the architect, watching as the first walls of my old life came crashing down. The next 48 hours were an exercise in brutal efficiency. The fog of shock had burned away, leaving behind the clean, cold air of purpose. While Isabella and Julian were likely scrambling, trying to weave a new tapestry of lies, I was deconstructing my life with the precision of a surgeon. At 8 a.m. the next morning, a discreet van from All City Locksmiths was parked in my driveway. A quiet, professional man named Hector changed every lock on the house, including the garage and the gate. He handed me a set of new, heavy keys. "You're all secure now, Mr. Hayes," he'd said. The words felt more profound than he could have known. At 9 a.m. sharp, my phone rang. It was the office of Ms. Diana Albright, attorney at law. Her voice on the phone was as crisp and starched as a new shirt. By 10:30 a.m., I was sitting across from her in a minimalist office overlooking Central Park. She was a petite woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She had the file Frank had sent her open on her tablet. "Mr. Hayes," she began, foregoing pleasantries, "I've reviewed the evidence. This is remarkably thorough." She gestured to the tablet. "The audio recording alone is a litigator's dream. The documented financial transactions, moving funds from a joint portfolio to a secret credit card to fund an affair and purchase accessories for a stolen family heirloom. This isn't just ground for divorce. This is a textbook case of marital fraud and larceny." She leaned forward, a thin, predatory smile on her lips. "Our position is not one of negotiation. It is one of dictation. We will be filing for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial malfeasance. We will also be filing a separate civil suit for the recovery of all misappropriated funds and damages. And I will be making it clear to their counsel that we have more than enough evidence to pursue criminal charges for the theft of the watch should they choose to be anything less than completely compliant." She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Is that aggressive enough for you?" "It's a good start," I said. While I was with Ms. Albright, my phone buzzed incessantly with texts and missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. likely my soon-to-be ex-wife and brother-in-law to be disowned. I ignored them all. Then a long, pleading text message came through from David, my best friend. Alex, man, I'm so sorry. I just spoke to your dad. I had no idea. Isabella and Julian both called me. They told me this insane story about you having a breakdown, that you were paranoid and needed space. I feel like such an idiot for believing them. Please, man, call me. Let me make this right. I read the message twice. The old Alex would have called him. The old Alex would have accepted the apology, desperate to patch the hole in his life, to maintain the friendship. The old Alex would have chosen a flawed harmony over a clean break. The new Alex knew better. Peace was better than harmony. I typed a single reply, my thumb steady on the screen. A lie is a choice, David. And you chose to believe there's over our 20-year friendship. I needed my friends last night. You weren't there. I sent it. Then I blocked his number. It was a painful amputation, but the limb was gangrenous. It had to go. The rest of the day was spent on the phone with my bank, my investment manager, my credit card companies. With each call, I felt a layer of my old life being sloughed off. Freeze the joint accounts. Cancel the supplementary cards. Revoke all access. With every yes, Mr. Hayes, that has been taken care of, I felt lighter. I was systematically dismantling the infrastructure of their betrayal, brick by brick, account by account. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, but it was a clean exhaustion. The exhaustion of a hard day's work, not the soul-deep weariness of living a lie. The demolition was well underway. The divorce was, as Ms. Albright had predicted, a surrender. Their legal counsel, faced with an ironclad mountain of evidence, advised them to take the first deal offered. Isabella walked away with her personal belongings and a fraction of what she would have been entitled to in a normal divorce, a settlement that was generous only in that it kept her from facing potential fraud charges. Julian, socially and familially exiled, faded from view. I heard through the grapevine that he had taken a job in another state, a quiet, ignominious retreat. But there was one piece of unfinished business that gnawed at me, the Omega. It sat in my safe, a beautiful object tainted by betrayal. Selling it felt wrong, like letting their ugliness have the final say. Keeping it as it was felt like preserving a painful memory. One crisp autumn afternoon, I took the watch not to a pawn shop, but to a small, dusty shop in the Diamond District run by an old man named Mr. Muller, a third-generation horologist whose hands moved with the reverence of a priest. He was a master of restoration. I placed the watch on his velvet tray. It was my grandfather's, I explained. It's been mishandled. I don't want it just serviced. I want it reborn. I want every trace of its recent history erased. Mr. Muller looked at me, through his loupe, his eye magnified and wise. He seemed to understand that I was talking about more than gears and oil. Sometimes, he said in a thick German accent, the soul of the object needs cleansing as much as the mechanism. I will take good care of it. 2 weeks later, he called me. When I returned to his shop, he presented the watch to me in a new polished wooden box. It was flawless. The crystal was pristine, the stainless steel case gleamed with a soft luster, and the gentle, rhythmic tick-tock was the sound of a heart beating true. He had not just cleaned it. He had, as he promised, restored its soul. That Sunday, I invited my parents over for dinner. It was a quiet meal, the first time the three of us had been together since that terrible night where we felt a semblance of peace. The wounds were still there, but they were beginning to scar over. After dinner, I brought out the wooden box and placed it on the table in front of my father. He opened it. He stared at the restored Omega, his eyes growing misty. "This belongs with you, Dad," I said quietly. "It belongs to the head of the Hayes family." My father looked up from the watch, his gaze meeting mine. He slid the box back across the table towards me. His voice was thick with an emotion he rarely showed. "No, Alex," he said, his hand covering mine. "A legacy isn't about who is oldest. It's about who has the character to uphold it. For a while there, I thought our family's legacy was broken." He looked me straight in the eye. "You saved it. You upheld its honor. It's yours. You didn't just inherit it, son. You earned it back." I looked down at the watch, its face clear and honest. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal. It was a symbol of resilience. It was a testament to the fact that some things of true value, could be broken and still be made whole again, stronger in the repair places. The first year after the demolition was a year of deliberate construction. I learned that healing wasn't a passive process. It was an active one. It required blueprints, hard work, and the courage to build on clear ground. My house was the first project. The cold, minimalist decor that Isabella had championed, all glass and chrome and shades of gray, felt like living in a stranger's high-end hotel suite. I systematically replaced it. The gray walls were repainted in warm, earthy tones. Her sprawling home office, which she'd rarely used, became my personal library and listening room, filled with vintage vinyl and shelves of books on architectural history. I brought in plants, light, and comfortable furniture that invited you to stay, not just to admire. The house began to feel like a home, my home. My career underwent a similar renovation. I resigned from the large, prestigious firm where I was a senior partner. The work was impressive, but it was corporate soulless. I took the capital I had protected in the divorce and launched my own boutique firm. I called it True North Architecture. The name was a promise to myself, to only take on projects that align with my own values, projects with purpose. I started small, designing a community center for an underserved neighborhood, a sustainable family home for a young couple. The work was more challenging and less lucrative, but for the first time in a decade, I felt a deep, abiding passion for my craft. My social life was rebuilt from the stud walls up. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed to the periphery during my marriage. I made new ones, people drawn not to the impressive facade of my old life, but to the quieter, more authentic man I was becoming. Marco, the waiter from the Argent, became a genuine friend. We'd grab a beer after a shift, talking about everything and nothing. He was studying for his private investigator's license, a move I had encouraged and helped fund. "You have a talent for seeing the truth, Marco," I told him. "The world needs more of that." When my 41st birthday rolled around, I found myself back at the Argent. It was a conscious choice, an act of reclaiming the space from the ghost of that terrible night. This time, when I booked a table for 6, it wasn't an act of naive hope. It was a statement of fact. The table was full. To my right sat my mother and father, their smiles genuine, the old warmth returned to their eyes. Across from me sat Frank Peterson, my mentor, his gruff wisdom a constant source of strength. Beside him was Ms. Albright, who had shed her legal shark persona and was now simply Diana, a sharp, funny woman I admired. And in the 6th chair sat Marco, no longer in a waiter's uniform, but in a crisp shirt, looking every bit the promising investigator he was becoming. The air was filled not with tense silence, but with easy laughter and rich conversation. When the dessert came, Marco had arranged for the same chocolate lava cake, but this time it was adorned with a single, brightly burning candle. I raised my glass a Macallan 18. Everyone at the table followed suit. I looked at the faces around me, my family, my allies, my friends, my true foundation. To my true north, I said, my voice clear and steady. And to the understanding that sometimes you have to demolish a flawed structure to build something that will truly last. Cheers! As the glasses clinked, the sound was not the brittle shattering of a life falling apart, but the solid, resonant chime of one being built right. Another year has passed. The life I live now bears little resemblance to the one that imploded at the Argent. The change is not just external, the house, the career, the friends. It's internal, a fundamental shift in my own architecture. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the man I used to be. The man who valued a fragile peace over a difficult truth. The man who was so afraid of conflict that he allowed his own perceptions to be negotiated away, explained away, and ultimately erased. He was a good man, I think, but a weak one. His foundation was compromised. The greatest lesson I learned from the demolition of my marriage was not about the perfidy of others, but about my own complicity in my own unhappiness. I had learned to live with the low-grade hum of anxiety, the small, unsettling moments of doubt, because confronting them felt more terrifying than ignoring them. I had chosen harmony over peace. I now know there's a vast difference. Harmony is often an illusion, a polite agreement to ignore the cracks in the walls. Peace is a solid foundation. It is the quiet strength that comes from living in alignment with the truth, no matter how harsh that truth may be. My office, the room that is the heart of my new life, is bright and sunlit. I spend my days here, sketching, creating, building things of substance and beauty. And on the wall above my desk, where another man might hang a diploma or an award, there is a simple, elegant black frame. Inside it is not a picture, but a small, folded cocktail napkin. On it, in a neat, concise script, are 2 words: check phone. It was the note that began the end, but also the beginning. It was the blueprint for the demolition. Beneath it, I had a small, custom-made brass plaque affixed to the frame. It reads, "Blueprint for Demolition. Foundation for a Life." Sometimes, when I'm wrestling with a difficult design problem, I look up at it. It's a reminder. A reminder that strength isn't about never being broken, but about having the courage to tear down what is false to make way for what is true. I no longer fear empty chairs. I no longer live in dread of a silent phone. My life is smaller in some ways, less grand, less performative, but it is infinitely more solid. The people at my table now are there because they want to be, not because they're supposed to be. The love I receive is not a transaction. It is a gift, freely given and gratefully accepted. I take a sip of my morning coffee and look down at my wrist. The Omega Seamaster gleams, its gentle ticking a steady, reassuring heartbeat against my skin. It's not a painful memory anymore. It is a part of my story, a symbol of a legacy that was nearly lost, but was ultimately reclaimed, restored, and made stronger. Just like its owner, I smile, a genuine, peaceful smile, and turn back to my work, ready to design the future.